So yeah, let's talk about the video. Let's talk about, does art need purpose? Well, first, I feel like it was a different video because it wasn't necessarily on an artist or anything. I tried to bring in Whistler because that was fun and it was a good way to like, introduce an artist and their art. But it's interesting because many people were saying that the topic is more complex than how it's presented, and some people are saying that it's not as complex, it's more simple than what is presented. And I find that interesting. And a lot of people, maybe without like necessarily wanting or even caring about it, like disagreed with my take, which is really, really amazing, because I think it's great that there are so many comments that disagree with me or my vision on art, but still follow the channel, which is, it's a good thing. And it means that just by that virtue, I can challenge maybe their notions on art, and I'm having my notions on art challenged as well, right? A lot of people disagreed with the idea that art for the sake of art is purposeless, or that that art for the sake of art is a purpose in itself, so it's not necessarily purposeless. And that's something I personally like disagree with. It's a conversation. I think it's a conversation that's better done through a conversation than on a video essay, like the video essay form. That's one of the limitations of the video essay form. I think it's hard to have a conversation, so I'm just putting the idea out there. Robin says, "Oh, I figured out the on purpose thing. If I want to express an idea, I create a work. If I just want to relax, I do paint by numbers." I think that's a good way to put it, or at least how I see it as well. If you want to relax, you don't necessarily have to do paint by numbers, but you can do paintings just for fun, and without necessarily expressing an idea or expressing an emotion or expressing whatever. And I feel like that's the kind of purposeless art I'm talking about. And because of that, I don't think that's necessarily art that is, well, I don't think that those are images that necessarily become art because of that. That's my notion of art personally. So yeah, likening it to a paint by numbers is good in that case, because I do think that art needs to express an idea or like an experience or something, and an aesthetic experience, at least to me, is not enough. Like my standards for art are a bit higher than that. An aesthetic experience can be relaxing, it can be great, but why can't purpose come from the inside? Why are we supposed to think that the purpose of art can only be external of oneself? I think it can come from the inside, like an experience, for example. If you experience even like alienation, or if you experience isolation or loneliness, that's the kind of experience that comes from the inside. Though it does have like external causes, it comes from the inside, and you can express or that idea or those feelings in a way that gives your art purpose. But if your art is solely for aesthetic reasons, just for you're just making art because I like making art, and it's not expressing those deeply human emotions that come from the inside, then yeah, Elsie says, I found with a lot of my artworks that they end up finding their purpose / meaning after I made / designed / worked on them, which is interesting. That is interesting, and it's a theory of art that I want to explore more, and maybe make a video on to explore it. And it's the idea that like art is very like often comes from like the viewer or the people who criticize it, and people who criticize it from their own experiences, or interpret it from their own experiences, right? And I feel like the fact that if you see a work of art through through its criticism in a way, or it makes it alive. It keeps it alive. For example, when you criticize, like you just look at a work of art, like let's say Michelangelo's like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, right? The creation of Adam. But by engaging with that painting, maybe in a more contemporary way, I did a video on that, like on engaging with it as like, oh, what if it's God. What if Adam created God, and that's the creation of Adam, as it, like the same way like the video I just made is the creation of the canvas or creation of Sean. Well, God is the creation of Adam. And some people were angry at me for that. But I think that through different angles at which you're attacking a painting, through your own personal visions of the world and all that, you're keeping paintings alive or like works of art alive. And the purpose can change that way. I think so. I can create conversations with the videos. That's what I try to do. That's what I try. I try to make like spark conversations or spark like, at least internal conversations. And again, in the comments, and I see that often, people talk about how, I can't like put in like give my opinion on an artwork because it feels like it ends the conversation in a way, because I'm closing off the conversation that I kind of present in the video by telling my opinion and telling like, all right, this is the right perspective. But I don't think that's necessarily like. Perhaps I should say, oh, this is my opinion, by the way. But I feel like, especially when it comes from YouTubers, it's always their opinion, right? Like whatever fact they say, very often, maybe not always, but very often, it's their opinion. And I hate when people say, oh, it's just my opinion, don't attack me. Like I'm stating this, but this is just my opinion. It's like, yeah, we know. We don't need to say it. Let's just assume that what people say is their opinion. It's their opinion. Let's stay skeptical of what they say. Stay skeptical of what I say. Natai says, I think it can be helpful to think of art as communication. Yeah, exactly. You can create a well-constructed sentence, but that sentence will not always be meaningful. Yeah. Well, yeah, like I think of it in terms of communication as well. But at the same time, you can communicate a sense of just pure beauty or aesthetic, like the people from the aesthetic movement. And I would call it not art. Though it is communication. I'm communicating my sense of beauty, my sense of the aesthetic. Yeah, it can be says you can title a blank canvas with a purposeful title, rendering it important. Absolutely. I don't know if you agree with that sentence or if you're criticizing it, but I do agree with that, because the idea is engaging with that blank canvas through the title. If there's no title, it might be harder to engage with, even though some people might, but I don't think it would be necessarily engaging. But with a purposeful title, I think it can spark conversations and it can create a dialogue between the viewer and the art, or between the viewer and another viewer that's also looking at the art. That's the kind of purpose I think is important. And I think that the blank canvas can have more purpose through its title, for example, than a purely aesthetic painting that won't spark a conversation or won't spark like a reaction from the viewer. And I think when it comes to art, we have to have those standards of like looking at art through the idea of having that kind of engagement. Alec Lindqvist, going back to AI art, the famous or the infamous controversial topic. How do you think AI art fits into the discussion of purpose in art? Is it harder to connect the purpose to the art when the artist is no longer the creator? I think the artist is always the creator. Like AI can create images, even if it's random, even without a prompt. Maybe if it does create an image, like if it doesn't have like the conceptualization or the communication of an idea or I don't know, of an experience or whatever, I think it's just creating an image and not art. And I think the purpose of art can only be communicated by like a human. And that's an interesting thing. Now I'm thinking about it. It's like I would also like something like, not because an image has purpose that it's necessarily art either, right? The Coca-Cola logo, its purpose is to, get customers or whatever, or create like a brand and have brand recognition through that logo. And that logo is an image and it serves a very clear purpose. But I wouldn't go as far as calling it art, unless you recontextualize it to underline the symbol that Coca-Cola like created, but like in itself, I don't think it's art, even though it's an image that has purpose. Yoav says, I think even nature, when conceptualized and contextualized as art, is art. And I agree. Yeah. Yeah. The conceptualization, contextualization is extremely important. And nature can be contextualized and conceptualized. Anything can be contextualized and conceptualized. Nature, it can be a urinal, it can be an AI image, and that's when it becomes art. Reserve Podcast says, I think the word purpose and deeper meaning are a different thing. Also, all art has a meaning. Its meaning is to be. Now, does it have to have a deeper meaning? Not at all. I disagree. Well, of course, if you watch the video, you know I disagree with that. I think all art does have a meaning if it goes back on itself. That means like everything has a meaning, right? I think if you just try to make art for the sake of making art, or just to relax or anything, like it does have meaning in the sense that, you know, its meaning or its purpose is to like relax you, right? But I don't think that it serves or at least doesn't, I don't think it necessarily becomes art just because it has meaning. Like I was saying earlier. But again, that's my opinion, whatever, right? I think the problem with the definition of art and like what purpose it requires and everything is that a lot of people try to make it as inclusive as possible, which is what people in the comments have tried to do. But the dangers of trying to make art as inclusive as possible is that you dilute the meaning of art to a point where it becomes almost meaningless, I believe, or it becomes harmful to the idea of art. And that's something I've talked about earlier, like before in other streams, as if I had two other streams. But the idea that anything can be art makes it so that people become alienated from art. If art can be anything and anything can be art, then people don't have this interest for art anymore. Yeah, I guess they're not fascinated by art anymore, because art can be anything. Like I can make art. My 5-year-old daughter can make art, as you've heard before, right? Because anything can be art. The whole idea of my channel is to show that there is deeper meaning to art. There's historical context. There's ideas that are being communicated. There's experiences being communicated. There's emotions being communicated. And to appreciate those, you need to do a bit of research. You need to dig into the painting. And it's by digging into art that you can appreciate it. And the idea that any art or anything can be art, and any art can be anything, that concept makes it so that people feel like, or I think it discourages people from digging deeper, right? Because anything can be art, and therefore you don't need to think, or you don't need to actually have something engaging to make art. So it makes people disengage from art. And I think we need engaging art, and I feel that need for engaging art makes it so that I feel like our definition of art needs to be has to do something with engagement. At least that's my theory, or what I advocate for. I think like art, or the definitions of art can change throughout history, and I think we're at a point where we need engaging art, because art has been so democratized and so freed that we need to like kind of restrain it a bit, not to discredit what isn't engaging, what isn't art to me, but to elevate what is art and like create this engagement. Yeah. A lot of people don't like the rigidity of what art is. And Lisette is one of those people, and I understand that the history of people who have been rigid about what art is, or have been restricting of what art is, has been a really, really bad history, because often when something is not art, they try to denigrate it. You know, we can think of the degenerate art exhibition, or the intaktete Kunst exhibition. That was. And I'm laughing because I'm saying it in German. I don't know. I love saying it in German, not because it's a funny event, because Nazis did that. But Nazis determined what is art and what isn't, and what wasn't art to them, they made fun of it. They were deriding it, and they were hating on it, right? And that's not what I like. And the history of saying that things are not art has been riddled with that, and that's not what I want to do. I just want to, like, instead of putting down what I don't think is art, I want to put up what I think is art, and like put it up in a pedestal. Yeah, maybe all can be art, but there are levels to it. Like artists, singers, dancers. There's bad art and there's better art. Yeah, that's true. That's true for sure. But I do think we can, like, I don't know, we can narrow the definition a bit. Too many people show art that is so uninteresting and so devoid of creativity that, like, calling it art is making a disservice to art, or to the public perception of it, to a point where it's so, and now that a lot of people call themselves artists and do art, and I don't know, I feel like it might come to the disadvantage of our perception of art. Sheldon Cooper asks, what is the purpose of art? Art can have different purposes, I think, but I think it's in communicating deeply human ideas, experiences, or whatever. Communicating, I'll call it ideas, but ideas in a broader sense that people can engage with. Going beyond just showing pleasing beauty, showing aestheticism, showing a cool picture. Henrietta says, Immanuel Kant says, only beautiful art can be called art. And I asked this YouTube channel, and I will put them on here because I love what they do and they're underappreciated, and I want you to subscribe to them. It's Amal Siendi. You probably know them. And I sent him the video in advance because I believe he's much more versed in the theory of art than I am. But they're amazing. They're great videos. And and he also brought up Kant. I'm saying that because you brought up Kant. And what my answer to that would be that art definitions need to change with the times. I think at a time it might have been solely beauty, but with beauty oversaturating us in terms of images, in terms of all this all this calculated commercial media that is super beautiful, but the ideas there's either no ideas, or the ideas are trying to sell us stuff. Most of the images that we watch are trying to sell us stuff, and it's not necessarily ideas. Selling ideas, I think, is fine. I think that's what I advocate for, right? But it's often selling. It's like it falls into like the consumerism, and I feel like because of this new context, we need to change our vision of what art is. And I think AI art prompted this in a way. That's what I was trying to say in my video on AI art. Not prompted this, but accelerated our need to reimagine what art has to be for us to best engage with art. Yeah, Paige McLaughlin says, yes, but historically artists depended on patronage of the church or wealth patrons, and lately the market. Yeah, there's always patronage, and it's going to affect what people do. I'm reading Paige. You probably know him, and you probably can tell me about him. Herbert Reed. I showed it at the beginning of the stream. Herbert Reed, and he made this one essay that I'm going to read after this one. I'm trying to get into Herbert Reed. He wrote one that says an essay that says "To hell with culture," and from what I understand is it's a criticism. From what I heard, because I haven't read it, I haven't even glanced at it. It's a criticism of culture in terms of like of how it's shaped by capitalism. At least I'll need to read it. Gnome's Child, the debased, says, have you ever considered talking about sculpture? I know you're the canvas, but it would still be cool. I would love to talk about sculptures, I just feel like talking about sculptures, or at least making video essays about sculptures, is not as compelling, or I'm not as inspired by it, because sculptures are 3D, and like video is arguably a 2D medium. And I like showing a painting or showing, but like if I'm going to show a 3D image, or like a sculpture, I probably have to show a video of it, because just a picture of a sculpture I find is very boring and flat. So it's more in terms of making the video essay. AM or PM Time says, what do you think of stand-up comedy as an art form? Yeah, that's interesting. I never viewed it as an art form, but I can definitely see it as an art form, for sure. Like a sort of oratory art form. As I'm doing like the Canvas videos, I think that sometimes the videos are in themselves a sort of art form, in the sense that they communicate, and they, I'm trying to, well, just the fact that you're writing an essay, you have the art form of writing, and there's visual communication. I don't know if that's necessarily art. I don't know if I would call it art, but a stand-up comedian also has those elements, right? Of using not only writing, but there's also a performance added to it, and not only a performance, but there's the whole humor that's being used as a tool in the stand-up comedy. So I think just by talking about it and by rambling about it, I do think it's art. I think stand-up comedy can be art. How it's used, though, can be, I guess it depends on how it's used. But even bad stand-up comedy can be art. Art also, it's like, what are you using to make people laugh? I think that can be like social commentary through comedy, through some stand-up comedy is super interesting. But I know in Quebec, the older generations of stand-up comedy is my wife, and it's oh, my ball chain of a wife, or my bitch of a wife, and it's often relationships, which is also a social commentary in a way, but I don't think it's incisive. Jean-Philippe Compagne says art can be just emotions, not only representing shapes or figurative. Yeah, I think it needs to be more than just representing shapes or figurative. That's like the conversation about what art should be, at least in the 21st century. That's my opinion. The Elf says, I think art does need a purpose, but that can be anything. But almost anything is enough. One can make something just as an exploration of shapes or as an opportunity to experiment. In the end, a conscious purpose helps give a direction, but an unconscious drive will always guide a piece's outcome. I'm not sure about that. Like just an exploration of shapes as an opportunity to experiment or anything. I mean, it can be art if it's presented and conceptualized in an engaging way, I guess, or in a compelling way, in a way that's going to make people engage with the work. But if it's just an exploration of shapes without context, without the conceptualization, I feel like we must have a higher expectation for art than that. I don't know if Obama's Elf was there earlier, but we were talking about how having, saying that art can be anything. Yeah, it does need a purpose, but that purpose can be anything. The problem with that is that if most things can become art without necessarily the engagement necessary to make art, then we're gonna create an art that is meaningless, because it can be anything. That's what I'm afraid of, and I feel like that's we have one of the most educated population in the history of humanity, and many of them, literacy rates that are higher than probably any time in history. But I feel like art or art literacy is ashamedly low, or shamingly low, I guess. but the reasons for that, I think, is because a lot of people are don't get art, aside from the whole point that is it can be anything. Because it can be anything, then it's hard to engage with it when you don't know art. Yeah, Tolstoy says the medieval theory of art knew about the artes mécaniques. These are the useful arts like calligraphy or types of architecture. And yeah, a lot of art in the medieval times were also about religious propaganda, like very useful, very there's also always like a very strong use, like they were like craftsmen basically. That's why most artists back then didn't sign their artworks, because it wasn't like the artist himself wasn't seen as something as important as like what they were doing, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess that idea is very common. The idea that medieval artists didn't sign just because the status of artists was just very different. They were just people, just like someone who would make any crafter basically. That goes to show the different types of art that have been that have been throughout history, right? And how this should give us the liberty to redefine art to what we want it to be. I know a lot of people want it to be super inclusive, and my take is to say that might be more harmful and do more harm than good. Yeah, Bixbit Bungo says sometimes art for the sole purpose of looking good is art in itself in terms of aesthetics. Yeah, but like my argument is that that's not enough. And we can talk about what is what makes art, and what purpose, what kind of purpose is needed to make something art. But I think aesthetics is not it. Just looking beautiful is I don't know. Like let's say when a musician plays a song for the 100th time, and they do it repetitively, right? Like they call them gig musicians. So musicians that don't necessarily write their songs, they don't even do twists in performing it. They perform it the same way all the time. And you can imagine like on a cruise ship, for example, or whatever, and they do gigs, and they play the same song. Let's say it's "Fly Me to the Moon," right? And they sing it and they perform it for the 100th time with no variations, and it's beautiful, but is it art? Right? Like it's aesthetically pleasing, at least to the ear, but is it art? Like what is it doing? You're performing a piece, but like, are you doing art? And what I would say, a lot of people would say, yes, that's art. But I would say, like, if we call that art, it might do more harm than good, in the sense that, we're not making art special. And I think we should, through our definition, make art special. Gabriel with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much. 2 of them. There's two things you can pursue for the sake of art of itself: truth and beauty. So would art be the end product for the sake of truth, and crafts, as Robin said, for the sake of beauty? Yeah, crafts for the sake of beauty. Yeah, then I agree to separate the two. Yeah. However, I still understand art as a process and not the end product. Continue comme ça. J'adore écouter des vidéos. Merci, Gabriel. Right? I can probably tell. I think I know who you are from your profile picture, which is really great to see you here. Thank you. And yeah, I do think that art as craftsmanship does play into this whole conversation. And I haven't used it. I haven't talked about it. But yes, absolutely. Because craftsmanship is not necessarily a bad thing. The craftsmanship in terms of building something, right? For the sake of it being beautiful. Someone making a really nice table by hand, right? And making it to make a nice, beautiful table. Would we call that art, right? And I do think that we shouldn't call it art, not because it's not beautiful, not because it's worthless, but because it's not that engaging. It's not like seeking truth, as Gabriel says. It's not confronting you with ideas or experiences or whatever. It's still beautiful, and it serves like a purpose. It's a table, but it's also a nice table. But and it's also serving the purpose of being beautiful and of conveying like an aesthetically pleasing feeling, right? But I think that would be craft. That would be craft more than like art. And I think that a lot of paintings or images and things of that sorts are are crafts more than art. And one is not higher than the other. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's just aesthetically pleasing, that's relaxing, that doesn't confront you, I think that crafts can be important. Can be interesting to look into. Like one of the examples I give often is landscape painting. I think those are like, and some of them require a lot of craftsmanship. They require a lot of skill, or any art that faithfully depicts the world in a very accurate way, but doesn't say much about it. I think that takes a lot of craftsmanship, but I don't think it's necessarily art. And I think that this separation does contribute a lot to the conversation. Thank you, Gabriel. And I know it's a hot topic. It's a hot take as well, because a lot of people don't like gatekeeping art. And it's true. Like I understand that it has a really bad history. Gatekeeping art has a bad history, but for the sake of making art appreciated, I think we need to make it special. Yeah, Obama's Elf says we should expand our appreciation of it. I think the definition of art should include bad art, since not doing so will lead us to judging something by it being art before actually letting it have a meaning. I agree that it should have bad art in its. The definition should include bad art. What is bad art? That's another thing, right? We have to determine what is the purpose of art first, and if bad art is the idea that this artwork doesn't fulfill that purpose, then is it art if it's not fulfilling the main purpose it's trying to serve, right? I'll give you an analogy. I'm not sure if it's a good one, but let's say you have medicine that is supposed to cure, I don't know, an illness, right? But it's bad medicine because it's not curing the illness. Well, is it medicine in the first place? Discrediting a work of art because it's bad is not a good thing. The line is blurry. It's another good conversation to have. Oh, I won't be able to sleep tonight. I'll be having so many questions in my head about that. Parts of me is like, is it even worth it? And someone asked about retinal art earlier, and I'll make a video about that. I don't think I want to expand on that today, but I will make a video on retinal art. I think it's such an important subject to cover, at least for me. Total Sale says, if the function of art is nothing material, then types of art that try to enforce the material are bad. For example, moralizing art. I don't think I have a gripe against moralizing art or that kind of, if the function of art is nothing material. I do think it's material though. I don't think it should enforce the material, but I think it should definitely have a conversation about the material. And I think moralizing art does, I don't think, for example, moralizing art or art that tells you how to behave or whatever, giving you a moral dictate or whatever, I think that kind of art is important and engaging if the viewer, instead of, just taking it for granted, can engage with it and criticize it and can talk about it with others. Max Andor says, I guess the purpose of art is to make you ask about it, yourself and the environment around you or the piece. Something that doesn't fulfill that, just a thing made with another purpose. I guess the purpose of art is to make you ask about it, yourself and the environment around you or the piece. I think what you're talking about, or at least what you're expressing here, is like engagement, which is what my definition of engagement. Ask about it, or ask about yourself, ask about your environment around you. Spilled Salt 486 says, do you have a least favorite or most overrated artist? It might be a bad question. It's not a bad question. I don't like Monet. People love Monet. And Monet was very influential. And for the time, Monet was important. Still is today. But, when I talk about retinal art, people love Monet, okay? But when I talk about retinal art, his lilies, I tried to make a video on his lilies once. For the people who don't know who Monet is, right? Monet lilies. I tried to make a video on his lilies once. What do you say about this? That it's beautiful? Yeah, it is beautiful. His process is revolutionary? Yeah, it was revolutionary for the time. I do like it in the sense that it's beautiful, but holy shit, how do I engage with this? What does it say about the world? What does it say about Monet, aside from the fact that he liked lilies and he had the privilege of being able to spend his life painting them? I don't know. That's my hot take. Page says World War One was a big part of his water lilies. I might have to look into that. And if it is, and if that interpretation brings engagement with World War One and like brings engagement with the water lilies, in that case, I'll take it back. And I do think a lot of art does need this engagement. And I've tried to engage with this, and I haven't tried. And it's might not be even Monet's fault. It might be the fact that so many art information online just emphasizes on how beautiful they are and nothing more. Or maybe I didn't do a good job at researching, but I can go back on that and say, oh yeah, it is actually engaging when I think of it that way. And I think the fact that engagement with works of art are so contingent on their interpretation makes me go back to like my theory that I'll try to look into it more. The theory that what makes art is more the interpretation of the viewer, or the interpretation of the artwork in itself. Yeah, Robin Marks says Otto Dix is art and it's so ugly. Yeah, Otto Dix is very ugly. You can think of also of Freud's nudes, ugly, but art nonetheless. Yeah, GTA 6 is never coming is answering someone else's comment saying these days something like Urinal would just be annoying ephemera than anything. Be annoying ephemera more than anything, I guess. But yeah, I agree with that, by the way. I think that kind of statement would be overplayed today. Remember the banana on the wall type of like that controversy, that succès de scandale. I feel like that was just, asking what art is once again, as Urinal did. I think that this conversation is important, and it will never find a conclusion. But I also think that the fact that it would be annoying and today is just, it's proof that this conversation is evolving, right? We're progressing beyond that now. I still love this idea, and I come back to it so many times, the Urinal by Duchamp. But if someone was to do it again through a different way, I would find it overplayed and deeply boring again. Yeah, some people have made artworks that think they're original and end up just being fountain rehash. Yeah, it's not groundbreaking anymore. And it's sad that people still use that. Does art have to be innovative? Innovation is going to be very hard. I think it can be innovative in what you're conveying.